The next guest on my podcast is someone who knows a huge amount about a specific branch of tech offering in particular, and especially in this local region. It's Richard Potter from Microsoft. Some of you who came to our Impact conference last year may have seen him doing the keynote presentation there. And he obviously knows a huge amount about the Microsoft technology offerings and how that's all moving, which is at breakneck pace right now. But he also has a real passion for the Southwest and this region and loves promoting it. So he's an ideal person for us to have on, and hopefully you'll enjoy this conversation about all things tech, Microsoft and AI. Richard, thank you very much for joining us on the Giant Minds podcast. You are this month's Giant Mind.
My pleasure. I feel honoured, absolutely honoured. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to start off by just explaining to people who are listening about kind of what you do and why you do it?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm a digital strategy advisor in Microsoft, and what Microsoft employs people like me to do is because we've got a background in both the business and the management consultancy, which is where I began my career, but specifically also techied that as well. Whenever there are conversations in some of the big boardrooms of the world and they want to be able to translate technical features into things like shareholder value and business impact, there are some people in the room, at least, that can make that connection between a new feature of AI and how you're going to move the dial in terms of free cash flow for a shareholder investor or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a terrific job, obviously, because you've got that continuum of the cutting edge of technology at one end, and then the real hard yards of ultimately releasing the capital that keeps these businesses of the world going.
I imagine that conversation in the boardroom has two letters that feature more than any others at the moment, all about AI and what it's doing.
It is. It's astonishing, and it's astonishing how much energy those two letters generate at different levels in the conversation and at different levels in the organizations. Sometimes it can be expressed almost like FOMO, that I'm a big exec. I was at a lavish dinner party at the weekend and so-and-so was talking about how they're using Gen AI or whatever it is, some new feature to do something. Why haven't we got it? Which is, I'm not saying it's coming at it from a position of great ignorance or something like that, but it's quite a superficial gateway into what ultimately is a very technical project. However, there are some boardrooms and increasing boardrooms that are so well educated now that they're really challenging. And we'll get on to agentic AI, I'm sure, in our conversation, but they're challenging the business impact of this technology much more closely, with much more granularity in terms of its impact on process workflows, etc. So you've got to have a way of reasoning over all of those different conversations that are taking place at the moment.
Yeah. So you're finding the level of sort of knowledge as standard about this stuff is really increasing in the boardroom, or has increased over the last year or so?
Particularly outside IT. I think, IT was always, as you'll know, is a dominion where probably CIOs felt that they held the knowledge, they held the deep understanding of these technologies. Out of necessity, I think what's happening is more of the sort of the business functions, the marketeers, the sales directors. They are deepening their understanding of what this technology really is. And really importantly, and probably more significantly, the value of data inside their organizations, which is the essence of really what's happening, because AI is just essentially putting data to work. It's using that raw material in an incredibly sophisticated way to do really quite impactful things inside organizations.
Yeah, and if you don't have a unique set of data, you're just getting what everyone else has had. So where's your advantage in that?
Exactly. And that's not diminishing everything that we do with technology on a day by day basis, because the value that you can that you can release by a really intuitive and really functional app is still staggering. But actually, a lot of the competitive advantage that's sitting underneath it is associated with the ownership of that data and how you're potentially making connections to bring that data into processes inside your organizations.
Yeah. And that's a difficult challenge for most companies, and the bigger the company, the bigger the challenge a lot of the time, isn't it? To bring all that data together in order to work on it effectively.
It is, and it's historically been the big challenge when you're building your multifunction apps that are looking across, you're connecting marketing with sales or, finance, breaking down those silos and putting that data together has always been the challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that interconnectivity. But it's interesting that some of the sort of advances in AI have actually pulled with them advances in the other bits of the technology that feed them, which don't get quite as much publicity, but actually there's some great data pipeline tooling out there now that wasn't really around 2 years ago, because the need for it's been highlighted so much more with these AI tools that sit on top of them.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And lots of the sort of the non-functional tools like security and governance and responsibility associated with the use of private data and things like that, because they're being put to work so much more readily now and being moved around different bits of the organization out of necessity. People have had to develop better practices around those and sort of tighten up on the hygiene and the governance with which they're using this data.
Yeah, and that's always been a sort of one of the strong leanings of Azure, isn't it? To like be really hot on all the access management and that side of things, data segregation and those sorts of things. I think it's where Microsoft have probably put in just a little bit more effort than some of the other cloud providers out there.
Yeah, I mean, but because our business is in the enterprise, our business is in organizations that are typically operating at scale or wanting to get to scale rapidly, that are quite often geographically dispersed, operating in lots of different jurisdictions around the world. And they want to do immense things with that data, and whether it's using our applications or partner applications or others, they want to put this data to immense value inside their organizations. And so Microsoft has to create a differentiated proposition that enables you to do that with confidence and to do that with ease and with the minimum of friction every time you're developing a new application and piece of workflow inside your organization.
Yeah, Microsoft has a couple of quite high-profile big data clients in the southwest of England.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about Microsoft's sort of presence in the southwest and what you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft's always been present in the southwest, but probably never at the scale at which it's been involved with organizations like Met Office down in Exeter.
That's definitely one that I was thinking of.
Amazing. I mean, and that is another level. Essentially the high performance computing that is done to develop the sophisticated models that give our daily and long-term weather forecasts that the Met Office are providing, that is being done on Microsoft's cloud. And that is a huge amount of data. It's also a huge amount of computing horsepower that is being provided in that. But I think what's really important about that is that once you've got that sort of center of gravity for a big regional player, and particularly one that's outside the southeast, that enables Microsoft to be more present in terms of the broader digital ecosystem that is sitting in the southwest. And the location, in fact, of Met Office being in Exeter rather than maybe in some of the bigger metropolises up where we're in Bristol at the moment, means that you can also reach further down into the peninsula as well, and you can extend that ecosystem right down to the tip of the southwest.
Yeah, there's definitely a big sort of climate tech presence in the southwest, which I'm sure is linked to the Met Office's presence, but there seems to be quite a lot of it sort of that runs right down into Cornwall, around there. So lots of fun companies to get involved with.
I mean, you and I are very invested in building up the tech capability in the southwest, aren't we? And you're always trying to find those differentiated angles where the Southwest can be more successful perhaps in other regions. And green tech, marine tech, blue tech, if you like, they're big because of the environment that we're in. This region's also got a significant amount of purposeful tech. There are more B Corps in this part of the world than any other part of the country. But let's not forget also that this part of the world also has a heritage in defence and also intelligence. So
and
cyber
too,
and aerospace and things like that. They're big niches for this area.
Yeah, lots of those using quite a lot of data and compute.
Exactly.
So plenty of opportunities. And do you want to tell us a bit about some of the initiatives that Microsoft kind of has in the Southwest?
Yeah. So we tend to describe the activity that we do as broadly sitting across 4 different programs. We're very invested in trying to drive enterprise, and through Tech Southwest, one of our really important partners in the region, we support Tech Southwest Growth Forge program, which is broadly an incubation accelerator program for startups in the Southwest. We try and bring as much help and assistance as we possibly can, encouraging customers to make use of things like Founders Hub, and where they can get free Azure credits to get going on their business. But we're also there to try and coach them and guide them and provide them support along that way. We do a lot associated with skilling and capability development in the area as well. It can happen at all levels, schools, right the way through.
That's a really big range, isn't it?
Absolutely.
From the sort of outreach stuff right at the bottom to real kind of like high level skills that come further up.
Definitely, right the way through to adults and and through further education along the way. We obviously want to make sure that people are not just understanding Microsoft's products so that hopefully they will see the benefit and make use of them, but also understanding contextually some of these bigger themes around what is AI and what is responsible AI and what are some of the big trends associated with the latest bits of technology.
Yeah, and that's a real challenge at the moment, and trying to keep up with that education piece because I find I spend a lot of time reading about tech and I struggle to keep up. So trying to sort of pass that on and bring people up to speed who are all going to be at different levels and that sort of thing, it's quite a challenge needing to kind of evolve the sort of material and playbook as we're going.
It's astonishing, isn't it? It is blistering at the moment, and best approached with a significant amount of humility, I think, because at any given moment, one specific piece of technology might sort of run ahead of another one, and you might have invested some time in understanding this particular technology, and then the next thing's coming along at the moment. I mean, there are some big trends that I think you can probably chart through all of this. AI, and I think I'll say this very lightly, but AI in the context of the pursuit of something that resembles artificial general intelligence. So I'm not saying we're running at AGI, but the way that the development of the technology is going is driving to much more autonomous, much richer, much deeper reasoning forms of AI, where humans are stepping back from a lot of the complexity and interacting with technology. That is definitely, it's where the academic development is going, and therefore because the technology is so closely coupled to the academic development, that's where the industry is following quite closely behind it. And then, as we've touched on already, this awakening of the importance of heterogeneous data in that world. So, the ability to reason over structured data and unstructured data, data that is grounded in different contexts, so it has got different meanings and semantics associated with it. Data that is both visual as well as digital and textual and things like that.
There's been some interesting sort of meanderings along that path where, if you look back 2 years ago, you kind of imagine it as this straight path from the first release of ChatGPT to AGI. But actually, it's kind of it seems to have meandered quite a bit along the way. We've had sort of images and video and audio come into it in different ways than we were expecting, and for a long time AI couldn't generate any images with any text in them without horrendous misspellings, and suddenly it just got really good at it. There's just been these evolutions in the way it thinks and the reasoning systems that sit behind it that have kind of caught us off guard a little bit. They're quite interesting reminders about how it's not a straight path.
Yeah, it isn't. And different tools are being thrown into it. It's not just one development of one tool as it's progressing. Different tools are being thrown into the mix to solve different bits of the problem as the problem is becoming more complicated. But if you think of the way that some of the simple experiences that we've had with the web have changed over the last 3 years, let's say, we've gone from a world where, when we reflect on it, we were doing a lot of the work when we were putting search terms into search engines on our browsers. We were trying to anticipate what the index was that was going to be a more successful search term than others. And then we shifted more into the conversational experience that we got through ChatGPT and Copilot, and we were able to speak in a looser language and have a few back and forths and hold the same context of those back and forths. But then we went through a period where we thought prompt engineering was really important. So being able to do that in a very structured way. Well, now with agentic AI, the prompts are becoming less important because we can throw a general goal or ambition at AI, and the AI reasons its way to how it feels it should have been prompted.
Yeah. I've really noticed a change in how I'm using generative AI, how I'm conducting myself with ChatGPT and other tools. Is that before I was thinking, just as you were saying, thinking of the web searches, like, I need to structure it in this way, and there's all these guides out there how to prompt. What you want to be as a certain person, have these concerns, and I was very conscious about doing that. But with the more recent reasoning models that have come out, I've completely switched, and now I've kind of loosened up and just start having a chat. Yeah. And the clues in the name, that's probably what we should have always been doing. But incredible. But the results have been getting so much better with just like actually kind of not worrying about that and just going into more of a sort of verbal diarrhea sort of mode where you're just kind of chucking stuff at it.
It's interesting, is it? Because there is a fine balance. If you think of what we're also trying to do with a lot of the applications that we're interacting with, is we're trying to develop a deeper understanding of the user. We're trying to get a bit more telemetry from the app user or the interface user as we're doing it. And so we don't want to not ask the user to do too much work. We want them to do a bit of work because we want to get more understanding about who they are. But equally, we know we don't want to frustrate them by taking them through a laboured process that is dysfunctional. So when you're building apps that have got those kind of interfaces in, getting the right kind of balance of developing a conversation with the user, but also taking away as much of the heavy lifting as possible from the user interface. That's a key kind of thing that is being thought through at the moment.
Yeah, we're definitely finding it an interesting challenge, moving some clients away from a forms-based interaction to a conversational interaction, because especially, so we've been looking at it in some regulated environments as well, where you have to have certain bits of information. They have to be clearly stated, but you want to allow a more sort of dynamic way of gathering that information, and still working it out, to be honest, kind of exactly how to do that and give the assurances and that you are kind of following a sensible process, not leading the witness and so on, getting the right sturdy results.
It's amazing, isn't it? And these are, I suppose, these are the sort of the UX design challenges of today. It's not about the design of a form. It's about the sort of, I suppose, the protocols and the monitoring and the telemetry that you're putting on the conversation that's sitting underneath it.
And there's a real shift that we've seen with some AI apps that we're developing, where the idea of QA and testing and validation has to really shift. So we're working with one which is a really difficult challenge to try and get approved as a medical device. And in the non-deterministic world of AI, that's suddenly a massive challenge because you can't prove that if this happens, then that happens, because it doesn't.
No.
And you've got to shift your whole mindset to thinking about validation and sort of proving that it's delivering outcomes rather than specific results.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? And so that, you then start having a secondary conversation about, I suppose, the telemetry that you're putting into the app as much as you are about the features of the app and how that's fitting jurisdictional requirements. And but the power is available to you for you to do that. Because it is innately digital and it is algorithmic, it can be reasoned over, but the regulators also have to keep pace with it as well. They have to think about how they're framing their requirements in a world that is completely different in terms of interaction and engagement.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge because also as humans we have this strange expectation that if a human's not involved, it needs to be perfect.
Yeah.
But if a human's involved, we're quite happy for it to be very imperfect.
Exactly.
And I quite like the idea that with self-driving cars, for example, you set the benchmark that it has to be twice as safe, half the accident rate as a human.
Yeah.
But a lot of people find that really difficult to swallow.
Yeah. And that is it's a cultural thing, isn't it? That we've got to, as soon as you start talking about involving the machine, it becomes absolute as opposed to just your average employee that is obviously going to make mistakes and do things ineffectively. You'll find this quite a lot in terms of the performance of AI models and hallucination challenges and things like that. As soon as an AI model has hallucinated, it's rubbished. It's absolutely it's pushed aside. It's made one mistake in one context, in possibly questionable application, but it's everything is hanging on every moment that it's doing. Whereas if you gave the same task to a new graduate that's just joined your organisation and you asked them to go and do a complex task, untrained, uninitiated, they would probably do the equivalent of hallucination. But we would be more tolerant in that context.
Our expectations have suddenly leaped from 95% to 100% rather than finding some middle ground.
Extraordinary.
It is interesting. And obviously the big AI change for us is some of the changes that are happening in the world of AI assisted development. And there's a lot going on there at Microsoft as well as elsewhere. There's just been the Build conference. Do you want to give us kind of a latest take from Microsoft on this?
I mean, I think the editorial on it is that, and Satya was talking about it very vividly, much more vividly than perhaps I could do, but that it is the shift into the agentic web is the big kind of wrap that's putting on it. And what that is saying is that we want to build and we want to equip developers with it, but ultimately we want to equip the consumers of the technology with it as well. The ability to step back from doing all of the wrangling with the great repositories of knowledge that either sit on the public web or in grounded data sources that you're using inside the enterprise. And how can you equip developers with the tools that they'll need to provide that kind of abstraction and also to do the code development themselves with incredible efficiency and to navigate the grounded body of knowledge that is development. So navigating repositories and coding and enabling the testing and the quality assurance process to be benefiting from what's come before it and being applied really efficiently in that space.
I think it's an interesting challenge because the thing we're always putting to ourselves is, okay, where's the human value here, and how's that changed? And I like your use of the word abstraction. It's one that I use a lot. I kind of think it's really just, to me, adding an extra abstraction layer on the top of it. With, as you've seen the tool sets evolve, we've gone from back in the early days, I used to write assembler code, and that was pretty low level. And then we had object-oriented code, and then I remember the first time I used a development environment that had dot autocomplete. So you press the dot and all your options came up, and suddenly it was magic,
Exactly.
and everything was loads quicker. And this just kind of feels like the next level up to me. It's just you're just moving another point up.
And I relatively recently I was actually over in Johannesburg running a session with a complete multinational group of people, and there were a couple of folks from Brazil, and we were running a GitHub Copilot session for them, and we were running through this sort of slightly ham-fisted exercise that we had this coding community to do. And we were just asking people to code in natural language, so just using inline natural language coding in the developer environment inside GitHub Copilot, and somebody was getting really confused with the instructions that were obviously written out in English in terms of the exercise that we're going through. And I slightly naively and confidently said to them, "Why don't you just write it in Portuguese?" It's just a Brazilian chap in there. Yeah. And he just interacted in Portuguese, in line. Most of it had already been in English. He dipped into Portuguese. It just switches, does everything. Because it's just doing the syntax change. It's just understanding that is a different language, and it's still got to end up in JavaScript or whatever it is that we were coding with. So it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is like the true Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
It's astonishing.
It's just amazing. And the agentic angle is a really interesting one. I mean, very generally, but specifically in development. People talk about agentic meaning in different ways with different contexts, I guess. But to me, I really take it just as connectivity and abilities to act one way or another. And a lot of that's very specific connections into subsystems, and some of it's quite generic, like some of the things that are happening now, being able to control a web browser. And once you control a web browser, you can do quite a lot. So the application of agentic AI into development is it seems to be moving it from it being the more co-pilot, someone sat next to you working with you, to being almost a little bit more distant.
Definitely. I think it's the shift of offloading a task. So the co-pilot experience, you are still doing the task, and you're looking for information in support of you doing the task. And yes, sometimes that task might be to create a document. Actually, you might think of it as sort of, don't have to type that out, but it is still you that is going to be doing the task, and you've got this assistant alongside you. When you move into agentic, you are offloading the task to the AI. The AI is going to run through the steps that are in that task. And some of the agents, those tasks are actually baked into the agent already, confined within that agent. So one of the things that we're using a lot at work at the moment, which is in preview, which is this researcher agent, one of our frontier agents, where if I wanted to create a business plan for, say I've got to go and do a presentation to a customer about a project, it will do all of the research associated with that, understand the format that it's got to be, do back and forth in terms of reasoning and checking to see whether the disparate bits are being pulled together. It's a task that will probably run for probably about 10 minutes in the background while I'm doing it. But what will be produced will be something very, very close to the final artifact of a really considerable piece of work. Now in there, the tasks have been predefined in terms of the researcher agent. But more commonly, what you could do is you could start adding in triggers that branch out to do say an order to cash process inside a business organization that can check and filter and go left and go right depending on parameters that are in that workflow. So it's stuff that's happening sequentially inside the agent, but it's also the connectivity of the agent into a broader set of workflows that are sitting outside it. But it's very much you giving that task away.
The evolution in my mind has sort of been in the early prompt engineering kind of example that we were talking about when we were thinking quite carefully about our prompts. We used to say, give me a plan for how you do this, and then you say, right, now go and execute that line of reasoning and do it. And that's now baked, or has been baked into some of the reasoning models for a decent amount of time now.
Yeah.
And it seems that that's just kind of gone next level to not just kind of think through things in a structured way, but also go out to lots of other sources as well.
I mean, there's some terrific stuff here. If you do find time to have a look at some of what Satya was demoing yesterday, there's a piece where inside the coding workflow that somebody's received, they've received a series of tasks associated with some code that they're working on. And Satya is pretending that he's part of that flow. I can't imagine ever assigning Satya a coding task, but he's picked up a task and he prosecutes that task just by clicking on his agent. And the agent is running in the background and doing the task that he's been asked to do. And there's a later development where someone is asked to produce some code for actually a UX for a form on an app. And their boss has literally scribbled on the back of a postcard 3 boxes and a bit of interconnectivity between them that are not even rectangular. They're just sort of, here we go, I want it looking like this, kind of thing that would be on a whiteboard, and given it to this person. The person has taken a photo of it, uploaded that photo, grounded the agent in that image, and said, I want it broadly to look at this. And it creates the code to get that positioning right on the UX. So there's sort of the multimodal aspects of it, the fact that you're integrating an image, some computer vision into the model, as well as actually some of the sort of the workflow elements of it. It's incredible.
Yeah. The computer vision side's really, really interesting to me at the moment, because I was talking to someone just at the end of last week who was saying they were finding more success getting some AI to analyze spreadsheets based on a JPEG of the spreadsheet. They were getting a CSV into it.
Astonishing. Wow.
And it was reasoning so well around the layout and the content that it was actually giving them better results than raw data.
And amazing, isn't it? So that whole sort of ETL process of data science could be just much more, something like this broadly. That's what I want. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Quite astonishing.
Yeah.
So in this incredibly fast-moving world that we are in, what do you think are the sort of top 3 things that people should be thinking about?
Wow, there's a question. So I think the key thing is be strategic in terms of what you want to do. So don't try and do everything, but be considered about what you want to do. So prioritize. There's a lot that you can do low-hanging fruit just by using generative AI off the shelf with things like Copilot, but other Copilots are available as well. But then also maybe think about some of the bigger things that you want to commission new apps in that are going to do really complicated things as well, and try and run at those 2 different speeds. Second thing I think is realize that data is still the real important thing here. AI is just putting data to work. Where your data is coming from, how you can get hold of your data, all of those kinds of things are probably...
How clean and ordered it is.
Exactly. And then I was going to say, underneath it all is don't forget the importance of the basics like security and governance of that data. Because that data is going to go places really quickly, really efficiently. You want to make sure you've sorted out all of those basic foundational elements correctly. And from a security point of view, don't forget that whilst you're using this kind of technology incredibly powerfully, there are people with probably more nefarious purposes that are also using this technology in the background as well. So keep up to date with all of your updates, and make sure that you're on top of all of your cyber as well.
Yeah, including the people training element.
Exactly.
Vitally important.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
How about you? What are your 3?
Oh, I think the main things for me are stay grounded. Like it's not the kind of panacea that solves everything. So remember it's another option that's in the toolbox, and that there's some options that were already there a couple of years ago that might still be your best options. I think that's kind of what we find with a lot of with a lot of our clients. And just try and keep your head above water and stay on a level path. It's very easy to be distracted and pulled around in lots of different directions. It can feel really kind of overwhelming, the sort of fire hose of information and knowledge that's coming at you. So I think everyone kind of needs to create their own way of, and their own trusted partners and their own people that they sort of speak to and rely on to keep them sort of on the straight and narrow. You know, I've got a couple of really good blogs that I follow that really kind of I trust to bring me the most important stuff, rather than just try and keep an eye on absolutely everything. So those are probably my practical tips.
Brilliant.
Great. Richard, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Lots of super fascinating stuff there, and I'm sure if we had this chat in 2 months, it would be totally different. So, for this moment in time, thank you very much.
And thank you for having me. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.